Welcome to our exclusive second act night shift mini-series, specially designed for those who are experiencing challenges in their nightly rest routine. We've partnered with night skincare experts Estee Lauder, whose iconic collection, Advanced Night Repair, is designed to support the skin's natural nightly renewal rhythm, harnessing over 40 years of pioneering night science research and repairing the look of sleep-deprived skin. We're talking to some of the UK's leading sleep experts, giving real insight into how to combat the effects of midlife changes to our sleep. Today's expert guest is Charlotte Faure Green. Charlotte is a BANT Registered Nutritionist and helps people manage stress, anxiety, sleep issues and burnout through sustainable lifestyle changes and science-backed nutrition advice. Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us on the night shift.
Oh, thank you.
I'm very excited to have you here. I am really sold on the idea of nutrition being able to help impact your health, but I had not thought that it might be able to impact your sleep. I'm a midlifer, I've just turned 50 and I'm really struggling with my sleep. So I'd love to know, first of all, why and when you started looking into the relationship between what you eat and how well you sleep.
I've always been a terrible sleeper. It has been just a lifelong struggle, really. So I started looking at it in childhood. However, I started really taking it seriously when I graduated as a nutritionist and really looked into the science of sleep in order to fix my own. And then it's become something that I'm really passionate about in helping my clients fix theirs.
What were your problems? For me, and I think a lot of midlife people wake up really early and it's really gutting because we've had years of having, lots of people who have been mothers have had years of waking up really early and dreaming of the time that they can sleep. Now I finally can sleep, but I can't sleep. Yeah. But also people struggle with not being able to fall asleep in the first place, or a lot of my friends have problems with waking up in the middle of the night as well. What were your issues with sleep?
My problem has always been falling asleep, so sleep onset, insomnia. When I went back to university and studied to become a nutritionist, I started looking really keenly into the science of sleep and getting a bit of an understanding about why I've always found it really hard to fall asleep early. And if we think about our chronotypes, so sleep chronotypes are genetically led and in a way environmentally led too. So the family that you're brought up in might influence it, but really it's our genes. It's really hard to go against it.
So your sleep chronotype, what does that mean really? It means like my genetic blueprint for sleep, is that it?
Your preference. So my preference is I'm a night owl. So my preference is to fall asleep sometime after midnight and then probably wake up at 8 a.m. Early birds like to fall asleep early, so maybe 9 or 10, and then they naturally wake up at 5 or 6. Or they're called larks, not birds.
Okay.
And then you've got some people who are just in between. And our chronotype is set by our genetics. So your parents might be similar. And it's really hard to go against those genes. So for night owls in a Western world, it's not set up for them to wake up at 8, 9, we need to be up at school, doing the school run when you're a parent, getting to work, being in the office by 9 o'clock. It's just not set up for us. That's
really fascinating. I didn't realise that people were sort of programmed differently. When you reach midlife, does that shift or... Yeah, it does.
So whilst your chronotype is kind of a blueprint for your circadian rhythm and your preferences for sleep and wake cycles, whereas as we go through menopause and shifts to our hormones, will change how our brain, how much rest we need, and how our hormone cycle, hormone clearance that occurs in the middle of the night, will affect how restful that sleep is.
So I'm going to guess now, but you can tell me whether I'm right, that the hormones are part of how nutrition can impact your sleep.
Yeah.
What did you discover when you started looking into it all?
So it's so nuanced and so, but it's so interesting. So our hormones will impact how we sleep. We are hormonally driven to sleep. So melatonin being a large part of our circadian rhythm, which increases from the afternoon onwards to bring on sleep. And it works with cortisol, which is our wake hormone, which is what gets us up and out.
And stress as well, is that right? It's like cortisol a stress hormone? Yeah, okay.
Cortisol is a stress hormone, but it's so much good for us. And a large part of a healthy sleep-wake cycle is having an effective cortisol curve first thing in the morning. So cortisol coming out of waking, it peaks, and that the purpose is to get us up and out of bed.
Oh, that's so interesting. I read a lot about cortisol these days. It's all over Instagram, and I always think I've got too much, but maybe it's not always a bad thing.
I think there's a Instagram, and I talk a lot about cortisol with my clients, specialise in sleep and stress. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We need it. Without cortisol, we would be dead. It keeps us alive, it keeps us focused, it keeps us striving for more. The problem is if we are not responding to that cortisol well and not clearing it after it's done its job.
So interesting. So then what you eat impacts the hormones that you produce. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
And if I am struggling to fall asleep, or if I'm struggling to stay asleep, are there different things I should be eating?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So if we think about our hormones and our neurotransmitters in our brain, they are literally made up of the foods that we eat, so proteins and fats. And then in order for them to function well and, as they should, we've got B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, all of these things that help them work together to build up the neurotransmitters and hormones themselves, and then how they communicate. So how you eat heavily impacts how your brain functions and how you're able to sleep.
So if, as a midlifer, I am struggling to fall asleep at night, what should I be eating?
Proteins. And I know that is the buzzword at the moment, has been for a couple of years, but protein is really important for a few reasons, not just the raw materials, but also protein impacts our blood sugar regulation, our blood sugar balance. So if we have blood sugar that is constantly going up and down like a roller coaster, that's going to impact our cortisol, stress hormones, our nervous system, and it's not going to give us a very restful night's sleep. If we pair carbohydrates, which are essential for our brain, with proteins, we can slow the rate at which those carbohydrates break down, giving us slow, sustained energy, positively impacting our cortisol release.
If you're someone who is struggling to stay asleep at night, is it similar advice, or is there...
It is.
Yeah.
Often waking in the middle of the night is a cortisol issue. So our cortisol starts to peak probably about 3 a.m. This is when we run out of fuel in the middle of the night. So our liver, still doing lots of work for us, says, I need energy and I've run out of dinner. So I need to produce my own glucose to do all of the jobs that I do in the night. And so it requests cortisol from our adrenal glands to do that. Some of us, if we're going through stressful periods, we feel that cortisol sudden surge quite keenly, and that's what wakes us. And then all of the brain chatter starts to come in, and it becomes really hard to...
Oh, that's so interesting. We're partnering with Estee Lauder's Advanced Night Repair range for this podcast. It's a powerhouse product range for people in midlife and ideal for those looking for harder working products in their skincare routine. It targets 7 skin concerns, including line reduction, skin soothing, firmness, skin tone and strength, hydration and radiance. Things we hear our second act audience talk about a lot. Very practically, when you're working with a client, say I came to you and I was struggling to stay asleep at night, do you look at my diet and recommend something? Or are there any takeaways that our listeners could, utilise that everyone could eat or everyone could change their diet to include that could help improve sleep?
Sure. So there's a few things that are really simple and really easy that I think most people could do. So first of all, ensure that when you wake up in the morning, you're eating breakfast. That is a large part of setting up the rest of the day. It turns off that cortisol request from the liver first thing in the morning. So we want to break our fast and we say, hey, liver, we've got this. I'm going to give you I've got some energy now. So that will slow down that cortisol curve to allow for melatonin to do its job later on in the day. Making sure that you have protein throughout the day, so you've got the raw ingredients. One particularly useful protein is tryptophan or amino acid. So tryptophan being the precursor to melatonin, our sleep hormone. So having some tryptophan inclusive foods throughout the day really help with sleep. So kiwi fruit, really high in tryptophan, bananas, turkey, strawberries, lots of food. So if you look for tryptophan inclusive foods, that is going to help you build that melatonin for later on.
That's really interesting. I was going to ask you because it's difficult to change your diet. And I think as a midlifer, you can be very busy. You're often looking after kids, looking after parents. But these changes seem quite small. Like actually bananas and strawberries are not that difficult, kiwis, to get into your daily diet. Do you have people that you work with that do struggle to make these changes? And do you have any tips for sort of somehow prioritising the changes and making it sustainable?
Yeah, when I work with clients, they do struggle to implement those changes. And I think often the struggle is that people are all or nothing. So often I'll work with clients and they're in the first session, they'll say, what do you think about NAD injections? And maybe I was thinking about going keto. And I said, well, let's pull it back down to basics. Did you have breakfast this morning? When did you have your last coffee yesterday? We tend to go for these big things, these shiny, quick wins, without looking at the very simple things that would be attainable for us.
Would that be your advice to people, to make sort of small changes?
Yeah, absolutely. So small, sustainable changes. And habit stacking is my favourite. So if we are already having a small break at 11 a.m. and we have a coffee perhaps and a chocolate biscuit, have that chocolate biscuit, but pair it with some protein as well to slow that blood sugar spike.
Like what? We're not going to have like half a chicken breast or something. What would you?
You could. You could, or you could have an egg, or you could have some peanut butter on an oat cake instead. So just switching it ever so slightly. Still have the chocolate, maybe a little bit less. If you're padding it out with some more nourishing foods, perhaps, and maybe the coffee you could have that as decaf, or change it to a green tea, which is going to have half the caffeine, but it also has L-theanine, which is a compound that is incredibly relaxing for us, so it balances out the caffeine.
What's your take on caffeine? Is caffeine, if with someone that is struggling with sleep, should we just not have caffeine at all? Or
it depends. Everyone's sensitivity to caffeine is very different, but I would say for anyone who's struggling to sleep, making sure that you have your last cup before 12 o'clock, 2 at the very outside.
Okay. So are there things that you specifically recommend to people to sort of have in their wheelhouse? I know when I'm trying to, change what I eat, change my diet, it's good to know if I want to snack on this. This is good. Maybe if I'm feeling hungry before bed, is there something that would be good for sleep as opposed to bad for sleep?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of information out there about digesting while sleeping and how that might impact getting into that really restful, restorative sleep. But having a small snack, if you're hungry, can actually be really useful because that will reduce the cortisol curve and that big drop in the middle of the night. So if my clients are hungry before bed, I always recommend, call it a melatonin smoothie. So almonds, really high in tryptophan, with banana, maybe some almond butter, oat cakes, banana on, rice cakes with almond butter.
I love all these things.
Yeah.
This is good news.
Good. But 2 kiwis as well have been researched to be really impactful for sleep onset.
That's so fascinating. Can I ask you for some very practical advice?
Sure.
Maybe we could do breakfast, lunch and dinner. Someone who really wants to try and fix their sleep. Give me a few meal suggestions.
Okay, so breakfast would be eggs. If you're open to them, they are rich in choline. Choline is the fatty substance that coats our neurotransmitters, making for better communication. So eggs, high in protein as well. Lovely start to the day, and that's going to give us a really smooth blood sugar journey. Then for lunch, I always like having some sort of complex carbohydrate, so sweet potato, quinoa, some brown rice, and then a good protein. If you don't eat meat, if you're plant-based, look to your tofus, beans, things like that, and varying the sources. But if you do eat meat, then chicken, fish, all of these things are going to give you lots of nourishing protein and minerals and vitamins.
Yeah, nice. So it's that combination of, like you said, the slow release carbohydrate and the protein.
And the
that's
protein
important.
is going to give you sustained energy, so we don't get these dips.
Okay. And then dinner, I guess, is the most important, is it? Or
Dinner is as important as every other
Okay.
meal of the day. And I think simplifying it and just sort of allowing yourself a bit of freedom in that we want consistency, but we want to be able to go out for dinner with our friends and enjoy life and all meals. So yes, dinner is important. Making sure that you've got a window to digest before you go and lie down is really important. But again, it's a bit more carbs, protein, just making sure those things are balanced.
Okay. And what advice do you give to your clients on how to actually make change?
Sure.
It's difficult to make change, even just, the habit forming and the remembering to do it for yourself. But if you've got a family and maybe your husband doesn't like the things that are on this new list and your kids won't eat kiwis or whatever, what do you have some tips or tricks for how to make the change?
Yeah, sure. I always say to clients, start on a Tuesday. Start on a Tuesday at 4 p.m. because we as humans, we love a temporal landmark. We love a new year, new me. We love I'll get through the weekend and I'll do it on a Monday. But what that really enforces is our all or nothing attitude. So if we start on the Monday and then someone goes, let's go to the pub after work, and then we've broken it, so we wait for the next Monday or the next year. So starting on a Tuesday so that we tell ourselves it's okay to nourish myself at any time. And it's also okay to falter, to enjoy life, knowing that you can come
That's
back
great.
to a basic
Yeah, I like
baseline.
that.
So always start on a Tuesday. With husbands, I don't know, kick them out. Eat the beans.
I mean,
I know, it's hard.
midlife divorce is on the up, I've been reading.
I mean, apparently so. It's the sandwich generation is
Yeah.
just a term that I heard for the first time a couple of months ago. I took my parents to Ibiza to visit my brother and his new baby and my son. And I just realised I was sort of
You're right in the middle of everything, aren't you?
absolutely
Yeah.
aging parents and their health. And then, you've got a child who needs you. It is a really tricky time for us in midlife, I'd say.
But the motivation, tell us about how, so you were really struggling with sleep. You couldn't fall asleep. You describe yourself as an insomniac.
Yeah.
And my assumption, because you're now teaching others, is that has changed.
Yeah, I sleep really well. It took, nearly 40 years, but I sleep very well. And I think a large part of that is honouring my chronotype, understanding that I do prefer to go to bed later, but if you edge it forward ever so slightly, you can bring that forward.
Okay.
And knowing that all of the things that I was throwing at it, and I had done since childhood. So my mum used to buy milk from cows that had been milked at night, so that it was higher in melatonin. They don't sell it anymore. They used to sell it in Waitrose. I was doing all of the things, and I had lots of rituals. And actually, that was making me more anxious to go to bed, and in a way, keeping me awake. So often I say to clients, let's strip it back. You've got all of these things in place. What if you don't take that supplement? What if you don't have to do these things in that order? And they say, well, I won't sleep. And I say, well, you're not sleeping anyway. So maybe your reliance on all of the things is what we need to look at.
That's so interesting. So I'm sure that people come to see you and they assume that you're just going to add, hundreds of things to do, but actually it's paring it back and sort of going back to basics in a sense.
Basics and taking it back and finding out what works for you, because there's so much information out there. Take melatonin, take, valerian, reishi, and all of these supplements and fixes. And actually, we are so different biologically that what works for one won't necessarily work for another.
And tell me about your most successful success story, someone, I don't know, obviously not giving details that sort of break your and confidentiality, but someone who was really struggling and now sleeps well?
So I have a client who I haven't spoken to for a few months, so you've just reminded me to check in with her, in her late 70s, who had poor sleep since a teen. And it was a kind of a last-ditch attempt to work with me. And I introduced her to a sleep therapist as well, and we worked together alongside each other, working on her nutrition, so the biological neurochemistry, and the therapist worked with her mindset, and together we managed to get it so that she was sleeping through the night. Her issue was that she would wake up at 3 a.m. and that would be it for the day, and she was exhausted on her knees and with a very full life. Yeah, she's
That's really inspiring, and I think that was a very good place to end, because that will give hope to a lot of listeners, because this really is a big problem for people in midlife.
It really is.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. It's been a joy to talk to you.
It's been so nice
and please join us next week, where we'll have more experts giving top sleep tips. This episode was brought to you by Estee Lauder's Advanced Night Repair. Wind down with a free Beauty Sleep Glow facial at your nearest Estee Lauder counter. Book online or in store.